All right, let's jump into another deep dive.
Sounds good.
This time, we're going to be taking a look at the Dyatlov Pass Incident.
Ooh. Oh.
So we're going back in time a little bit to 1959.
Okay.
And this is one of those mysteries, you hear people talking about it, and everybody's always got their own theories. And
Right.
it happened in the Ural Mountains.
Oh, wow.
So very, very cold.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at diaries, photos, we got official reports, even some declassified Soviet files.
Wow, that's great.
So should be interesting to see what we discover as we go through all this stuff.
Yeah, I'm excited to try and put the pieces together on this one.
Yeah, because this is a real head scratcher. This is a real mystery.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that's captivated people for decades, and we're still talking about it today. So
Yeah.
there's definitely something there.
Yeah, so it started out as an expedition.
Okay.
And these hikers were from the Ural Polytechnic Institute,
Hmm.
all young people in their 20s.
Okay.
Pretty experienced hikers. Okay.
Going for their grade third certification, which was the highest level in the Soviet system.
Wow.
And they were very meticulous in documenting their journey.
Oh, good.
So that's where we get a lot of this information from.
Right.
They left diaries, they took a lot of photos, and so, it's almost like you can retrace their steps and you feel like you're there with them
Yeah.
as they're starting out on this adventure.
Well, and that's what's always struck me, is that these weren't just some novices who wandered off into the wilderness.
Right.
They had a plan. They were well prepared.
Yeah.
Their leader was 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, and they had a route planned through the northern Ural Mountains.
Right.
And their goal was to reach this Mount Otorten. And that name, it translates to, and this is a little ominous, don't go there in the local Mansi language.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's not a great sign.
Yeah. Maybe they should have paid attention to that, right?
It does make you wonder if they should have taken that as a warning.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So the Dyatlov Pass itself, this region is known for being pretty brutal,
Oh, yeah.
especially in winter.
Right.
We're talking about incredibly cold temperatures, sudden blizzards. Navigation can be almost impossible.
Yeah, it's a very unforgiving landscape.
Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart, for sure.
No, definitely not.
And you get this feeling when you look at their diaries and photos that they were definitely battling the elements,
Yeah.
pushing their limits.
It's one of those places where you're surrounded by this incredible beauty, but also this constant sense of danger.
Right.
It's a very powerful combination.
Yeah, and there's this one detail about this case that always, I don't know, it always kind of gives me chills.
Oh,
One of the hikers, his name was Yuri Yudin,
okay.
he actually had to turn back early
Oh, wow.
because he got sick.
Oh, no.
So he never made it to the final campsite.
Wow, I wonder can you imagine if that was you?
I know, and it makes you wonder if he would have, had the same fate if he had continued.
It's such a haunting thought, right?
Yeah.
He unknowingly saved his own life.
Yeah,
But it also just adds another layer of mystery to this whole thing,
it does.
Because it's like, what if he had been there?
Yeah.
Would things have turned out differently?
Right.
Or was it just fate?
Yeah. Would he have met the same end?
Right.
Or would his presence have somehow changed what happened? We'll never know.
We'll never know. That's the crazy part.
So let's fast forward a little bit
Okay.
to February 1st, 1959, which is where their documented timeline ends.
Okay.
This is when they set up camp on the slopes of this mountain called Kholat Syakhl, which means Dead Mountain.
Oh, another cheerful name.
I know.
It's like they're just tempting fate at this point.
Right. Like, come on, guys. Maybe we should rethink this whole thing.
Right.
But what happened after that is where the real mystery starts.
Yeah, that's where things take a very dark turn.
Yeah.
And it's a mystery that unfolds in these really, distinct stages. And each discovery is just more perplexing than the last.
Right.
So weeks go by, and the group is supposed to return, but they don't.
Right.
So search parties are sent out.
Okay.
And what they find at that campsite,
Yeah.
it's like something out of a nightmare, honestly.
It's crazy. Okay, so we've got a tent that has been slashed open from the inside.
What?
Belongings are strewn about, everywhere.
Oh.
Shoes, warm clothing, food.
Okay, so that's already strange, right?
Right.
Because any experienced hiker
Would never.
leave that stuff behind.
Especially in those conditions.
Right. So what could have possibly made them just run off like that?
It's almost like they fled in a blind panic.
Yeah, it's like they were running for their lives.
Right, and leaving behind everything that would have helped them survive.
It's a real puzzle.
Yeah, and that's the million-dollar question.
It is.
What on earth could have driven them to make those choices?
Yeah, and that's what investigators have been racking their brains over for all these years,
Yeah.
like trying to imagine.
It's almost like if you close your eyes and you put yourself in that position.
Right.
You're one of the rescuers. You come upon this scene. The mountains are silent.
Yeah.
You've got the tent, flapping in the wind.
Right.
And there's just this sense of dread.
Yeah, like something terrible happened here.
Yeah, and as they continued to search, things just got stranger.
Oh, no.
They started finding the bodies.
Oh, wow.
And they weren't all together. They were found in stages.
Okay.
Some were a significant distance away from the tent and in very different states of dress.
What do you mean?
So some were almost naked,
Wow.
exposed to the elements.
Yeah.
Others were wearing clothes that seemed to belong to their companions.
Oh, that's really strange.
It's a very jumbled, confusing scene that's really difficult to explain.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
No, it really doesn't.
It's like the scene just doesn't fit with any kind of logical explanation.
Right.
That's what makes this whole thing so fascinating.
Yeah.
Because you've got these experienced hikers making decisions that just seem totally irrational.
Right.
This slashed tent, the belongings scattered around, the clothes situation.
Yeah.
It's like whatever happened that night, it completely defied the normal rules of survival.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to try to unpack here in this deep dive.
Right.
We're going to dig into those official investigations. We're going to look at the conflicting theories, all of them.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we're going to leave it up to you, the listener, to decide what you think really happened on that mountain.
Exactly.
Because there's no easy answers here.
No, there really isn't.
But that's part of what makes this case so compelling.
It is.
It's a puzzle that might never be fully solved.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we can't try to put the pieces together.
Exactly.
And maybe, just maybe, we'll get a little closer to the truth.
Yeah, well, let's hope so, because this is one of those cases that really it sticks with you.
Oh, absolutely.
And you keep thinking about it long after you've heard about it.
It's one of those mysteries that gets under your skin
Yeah.
and just stays with you.
It does.
I think that's because it taps into something deep within us, this fear of the unknown, this need to understand what happened.
Yes, and I think that's what we're going to try and do today.
Good
try and understand this mystery a little bit better.
Right.
Even if we can't fully solve it.
Even if we don't have all the answers.
Right.
I think the journey of exploring these questions is just as important as finding the definitive solution.
Agreed.
So let's get started, shall we?
Yes, let's dive in. So we've got this really chaotic scene.
Yeah.
Like a puzzle, but with some pretty disturbing pieces.
Right.
What was it about the initial findings from the rescuers, the investigators, that really stood out to you?
Well, the thing that struck me, and it still puzzles researchers to this day, is that there's no clear external threat.
Right.
You know, like they weren't attacked by animals.
Right.
There's no evidence of a struggle with other people.
Mm-hmm.
But it's obvious that they experienced something terrifying.
Yeah.
Something that made them flee their tent in the middle of the night, barely dressed, into a blizzard.
Right. And then some of the injuries they found when they did the autopsies, those just deepen the mystery even more.
Definitely.
It wasn't just frostbite.
Right.
Some had like severe internal injuries, fractured skulls, broken ribs.
Wow.
It's the kind of trauma you would expect from a car crash.
Yeah.
But there were no external wounds to explain it.
It's almost like they were hit by some invisible force.
Right.
That's a good way to put it.
This invisible force.
Yeah, because you've got this absence of a tangible enemy.
Right.
And that just throws the door wide open for all kinds of speculation.
Theories.
Yeah, theories.
Ranging from plausible to completely bizarre.
Exactly. And we've got a lot of ground to cover.
We do.
So let's start with one that's been around forever.
Okay.
The avalanche theory.
Right. On the surface, it makes sense.
Right. Avalanche, forces them to flee the tent.
Case closed.
But not so fast.
Okay.
There's a few problems with that.
Right.
First of all, these hikers were experienced mountaineers.
Right.
They would have known better than to camp in a spot that was prone to avalanches.
Mm-hmm.
They were skilled at reading the terrain, the weather conditions.
Yeah.
Secondly, you've got those internal injuries.
Right.
A wall of snow wouldn't cause that kind of localized trauma.
Yeah.
And then thirdly, if there had been an avalanche, there should have been more evidence, like debris patterns,
right.
signs of a struggle against the snow.
Yeah, and that wasn't there.
It wasn't there.
So the avalanche theory, it's got some holes.
It does.
But what about those injuries then?
Right.
Could they have been caused by something other than an impact?
Well, that's where the infrasound theory comes in.
Okay.
Bear with me here. This is going to get a little technical.
Okay, I'm ready.
Have you ever heard of a Kármán vortex street?
Honestly, not until I started looking into this case.
Yeah, it does sound kind of sci-fi, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But the science behind it is pretty cool.
Okay.
So basically, when wind flows over a certain type of terrain, like the mountains around Dyatlov Pass,
Okay.
it can create these swirling vortices.
Like invisible whirlpools.
Yeah, exactly. Invisible whirlpools in the air.
Okay.
And these vortices can generate powerful, low-frequency sound waves.
Sound waves?
Yeah, sound waves called infrasound.
All right, so invisible sound waves. But how could those hurt someone?
Well, here's the thing about infrasound.
Okay.
It's below the range of human hearing.
You can't hear it.
No, we can't consciously perceive it.
Okay.
But our bodies might still react to it.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's research that suggests exposure to really intense infrasound can cause some weird stuff. Anxiety, disorientation, nausea, even hallucinations.
Oh, wow.
And some researchers even think it could explain those internal injuries.
Ow.
Because infrasound can resonate with our internal organs,
Oh, wow.
causing damage without any external signs.
So are you saying they were basically scared to death by a sound they couldn't even hear?
It's a possibility.
Wow.
The terrain around Dyatlov Pass, the strong winds that night, it could have created the perfect conditions for a Kármán vortex street. And if they were exposed to that, it might explain why they ran from the tent, the disorientation, the terror.
It's like being surrounded by this invisible force that's driving you crazy.
Yeah, that's a pretty chilling thought.
It is. It's like tapping into our primal fears.
Exactly.
The things we can't see or understand.
The things that go bump in the night, right.
Right, exactly.
But we got to be careful here.
Oh, yeah.
Because we don't fully understand the effects of infrasound on humans.
Right.
There's no proof it was a factor in this case.
So it's still a theory.
It's a compelling theory, but still a theory.
But it's definitely more satisfying than just a compelling natural force.
You're talking about the official conclusion from the Soviets.
Yeah, that was their explanation.
Yeah, a bit vague, don't you think?
Super vague.
And a little suspicious, considering the whole Cold War context.
Right, the Soviet Union and their secrecy.
Exactly. It makes you wonder if there's something more to this story.
Which brings us to the conspiracy.
Oh yeah, the conspiracy theories.
Cover-ups, secret weapons testing, all that.
Right.
What do you make of those? Is it just paranoia, or is there something there?
Well, you got to be skeptical.
Of course.
But you also got to remember the historical context.
Right, the Cold War.
Exactly. Paranoia was rampant.
Yeah.
And the Soviets were notorious for keeping secrets.
So something sinister happening, it's not impossible.
Not impossible at all.
And then there's the radioactive clothing.
Ah, yes, that's a big one.
Some of their clothes had traces of radiation on them.
Right, and that's a detail that you just can't ignore.
How do we explain that?
Well, there's a few possibilities.
Okay.
Maybe they came into contact with something radioactive along their route.
Okay.
Maybe the contamination happened during the recovery or the investigation. Or, and this is where it gets interesting,
Yeah.
maybe it's connected to some secret military activity.
That's where things get really juicy.
It's like stepping into a spy movie.
Right.
Secret weapons tests, accidental exposure, maybe even a deliberate cover-up.
And the fact that the Soviets were so secretive just adds to the intrigue.
Of course, the less they tell us, the more our imaginations run wild.
So where does that leave us? We've got natural disasters, weird sound waves, Cold War conspiracies.
That's a lot to take in.
Are there any other theories we should talk about?
Well, there are a few others floating around out there, but most of them have been debunked.
Okay.
Like the one about an attack by the indigenous Mansi people.
Right, I read about that.
There's just no evidence to support it.
Yeah.
The Mansi have no history of violence towards outsiders.
It seems like that theory came from people wanting a simple explanation.
Yeah, people crave explanations, even if they're based on prejudice or misinformation.
It's human nature.
It is, and that's why it's so important to look at this case with a critical eye.
Right.
Separate fact from fiction. Be open to the idea that some questions might not have easy answers.
Well, speaking of unanswered questions, there's one that's been bugging me this whole time.
Okay, what is it?
What if Yuri Yudin, the hiker who turned back,
Right.
what if he'd stayed with the group?
Oh, that's a good question.
Would he have died too? Or would he have somehow changed what happened?
It's impossible to know for sure, but it does make you think about the role of chance in all of this.
Yeah.
One little decision to go forward, to turn back, it can change your life forever.
It makes you think about all the little things that led up to that night on Dead Mountain.
Right. What if they hadn't gotten lost?
Yeah.
What if the weather had been different?
It's a rabbit hole of what ifs.
It is, and I think that's part of what makes this case so fascinating.
It forces us to confront the limits of what we know,
Yeah.
the fragility of life,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that some mysteries might never be solved. It's humbling.
It is. It really is.
But it also makes you want to keep searching for answers.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that there's still so much we don't know about the world.
Well, we're going to keep searching for answers in this deep dive.
We are, and hopefully we can shed a little more light on this mystery.
So let's keep going.
Let's do it.
It really does make you think,
Todd.
even after you've gone over it all, there was something that happened years later
Oh, yeah.
that kind of shook things up again.
Okay.
Back in 2019. The Russian authorities decided to reopen the case.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
After all these years.
After all these years.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, all this speculation, all these theories going around. Did they finally figure out what happened on Dyatlov Pass?
Well, the 2019 investigation, it had a limited scope.
Okay.
They were really focused on natural explanations.
Okay.
So they ruled out anything like military involvement or those more out there theories
All right.
right from the start. So what did they conclude?
Yeah.
A rare kind of delayed avalanche.
An avalanche.
Yeah, but one that was triggered by the hikers themselves.
Oh, how's that possible?
Well, they think that when the hikers cut into the snowpack to set up their tent,
Okay.
it could have destabilized the slope above them,
Oh, I see.
leading to that delayed avalanche,
Okay.
which could explain the force needed for those internal injuries
Right.
and that chaotic scene at the campsite.
So they're basically saying it was a tragic accident.
Yeah, a really freak combination of human error and this unusual natural phenomenon.
Wait, does that explain everything? What about the radioactive clothing?
Right.
And some experts say an avalanche wouldn't have happened in that spot anyway.
Right.
It seems like this new investigation just created more questions than it answered.
You're not wrong. The 2019 investigation, it gave us a possible scenario, but it doesn't address all the weird stuff.
Right.
Like that radioactive clothing is still a mystery.
Yeah.
And the avalanche theory, sure, it's plausible, but it still leaves some gaps.
It does.
I think the main thing to remember here is that even with all our fancy technology and scientific analysis, we might never have a complete picture of what happened that night.
So after all this, after looking at the diaries, the photos, reports, all the theories, what's your big takeaway? What sticks with you the most after spending all this time with this case?
You know, for me, the Dyatlov Pass incident, it really highlights the limits of what we can know. We want explanations. We want to make sense of things.
I do.
Especially when it's something as tragic and confusing as this.
Right.
But sometimes the answers just aren't there.
Yeah.
And maybe that's okay.
Okay.
Maybe the mystery itself is what keeps us interested,
That's a good point.
what makes us curious, what makes us question things.
I like it.
It's not always about finding a definitive answer.
Right. It's about the journey.
Exactly. It's about the exploration, the process of trying to figure things out.
It's pretty humbling when you think about it.
It is.
That even with all our effort, some secrets stay hidden. Some stories just remain incomplete.
And that makes you wonder
Yeah.
what other mysteries are out there.
Right. Just waiting for us to discover them.
Exactly. The Dyatlov Pass incident, it's like this little reminder. The world's still full of wonder and things we don't understand.
I like that.
It encourages us to keep searching, keep asking questions,
Yeah.
and to be okay with the fact that some answers might always be out of reach.
Well said. And for those of you listening, if this deep dive sparked your curiosity, we encourage you to do some exploring of your own.
Absolutely.
We'll have links to some amazing resources in the show notes.
Yeah, photos from the expedition, excerpts from the diaries, documentaries.
Yeah, this is a case that really rewards you for digging deeper.
And as you go down that rabbit hole, remember to keep an open mind.
Yes.
Weigh the evidence, look at it from different angles.
Yeah.
And hey, maybe you'll come up with your own theory about what happened that night on Dead Mountain.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, the Dyatlov Pass incident,
It's more than just a cold case.
it's a story about adventure.
Yeah.
About pushing limits.
About the power of the unknown.
And about the fact that some mysteries just refuse to be solved.
And that's okay.
It is.
Because sometimes the not knowing is what makes it so compelling.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there for today.
Yeah.
But we hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the Dyatlov Pass incident.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It has.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll finally get those answers we're looking for.
Maybe.
But until then, the mystery lives on.
It does.
And that's part of what makes it so captivating.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
So yeah, bye.